Synanon began as a rehabilitation program for drug addicts in 1958. By the 1970s, it had become an armed organization placing rattlesnakes in mailboxes. The mechanism that produced this transformation has a name. Chuck Dederich invented a group confrontation ritual called the game. Participants were required to attack each other verbally, brutally, relentlessly, without restraint. The stated purpose was to strip the ego down to its authentic core. The actual function was far more specific. When a person is publicly humiliated and then embraced by the same group, a powerful psychological bond forms. Trauma bonding through oscillating humiliation and validation is among the most effective and durable forms of coercive control. Members who survived the game felt they had proven something about themselves. They had proven compliance. And compliance, not sobriety, was the actual product Synanon was producing. This was episode 12. In 1978, a prominent California attorney named Paul Morantz led a legal campaign against Synanon, the organization he had once viewed as a genuine force for social good. In October of that year, he reached into his mailbox and was bitten by a 4.5-foot rattlesnake whose rattle had been removed. He nearly died. The snake had been placed there on the orders of Charles Chuck Dederich, Synanon's founder. The distance from rehabilitation program to attempted assassination is the subject of this episode. That distance was traveled through a series of psychological mechanisms that were at every stage internally coherent. That is what makes it clinically significant. Synanon was founded by Chuck Dederich in Ocean Park, California in 1958. Dederich was a recovering alcoholic, a former advertising man, and a person of enormous, restless, undisciplined intelligence. His founding insight was genuine, that addicts could help each other recover through radical, honest confrontation in group settings. The peer support model was then, and remains now, clinically valuable. Synanon's early results were real. Former heroin addicts who had failed in every conventional treatment setting were achieving sustained sobriety. The organization attracted media attention, celebrity endorsement, and substantial donations. The seed of its destruction was planted in the seed of its success. The central technology of Synanon was a group confrontation ritual called the game. The game had explicit rules. All personal information was permissible ammunition. Participants were required to attack each other verbally without restraint. Their appearance, their history, their perceived character flaws, their relationships. Nothing was protected, no topic was off limits. The stated therapeutic goal was to dismantle the ego defenses that enabled denial, the psychological armor that allowed addicts to avoid confronting the reality of their behavior. There is legitimate clinical support for the idea that ego defense disruption can precede genuine insight. The problem was structural. In a legitimate therapeutic context, confrontation is bounded, temporary, and followed by integrative support. The therapist holds the container. In the game, the container was the group itself, and the group was controlled by Dederich. The psychological mechanism the game exploited is now well documented in attachment research. When a person is subjected to intense distress by a group and then receives warmth, validation, and belonging from the same group. A powerful bond forms. This is not a paradox. It is a predictable outcome of how the human attachment system processes threat and comfort. The brain's reward circuitry responds to relief from distress with dopamine release. When the source of both the distress and the relief is the same group, the group becomes neurologically associated with reward. Survivors of the game describe the post-game feeling as euphoric, a sense of having been seen, known, and accepted in their worst. This euphoria was real. It was also manufactured. Through the 1960s and early 1970s, Synanon expanded. It established residential communities. It developed its own school system for children of members. It created businesses, gas stations, advertising agencies, construction companies that generated revenue and kept members economically embedded in the organization. The game evolved from a therapeutic tool into a governance mechanism. Dederich used it to manage dissent, punish disloyalty, and establish behavioral standards throughout the community. Members who questioned decisions were gamed. Those who resisted too visibly were gamed publicly in front of the full community. The result was a culture in which compliance was the only psychologically safe position. Chuck Dederich began drinking again in the mid-1970s. After years of sobriety, he began making increasingly erratic pronouncements that vasectomies should be mandatory for male members, that existing marriages should be dissolved and spouses reassigned, that the organization should prepare to defend itself physically. The members who might have challenged these pronouncements had been systematically conditioned through years of the game to distrust their own judgment when it conflicted with Dederich's. Doubt had been gamed out of them. This is the paradox of Synanon's collapse. The therapeutic mechanism that had been the source of its early success, radical ego disruption, had produced a population unable to mount the internal resistance that genuine therapeutic progress requires. It had produced compliance dressed as recovery. In the mid-1970s, Dederich established a paramilitary wing called the Imperial Marines. Members were trained in self-defense. Weapons were acquired. The organization began stockpiling firearms. This militarization was framed as protection against external enemies, law enforcement, journalists, and former members who had spoken publicly about abuses. The framing had a self-fulfilling quality. As Synanon became more aggressive toward outside critics, external scrutiny increased, which Dederich used to justify further militarization. The rattlesnake attack on Marantz was the most visible output of this system, but it was one of multiple violent incidents attributed to Synanon during this period. Dederich was arrested in December 1978 in connection with the Marantz attack. He pleaded no contest to charges of conspiracy to commit murder. Due to his health at the time of sentencing, he received no prison time. Without him at its center, Synanon rapidly dissolved. The businesses were sold. The communities dispersed. This collapse confirmed what coercive control researchers consistently observe. Organizations built around a single controlling figure are structurally fragile. Remove the center and the system collapses, because the system was the center. Synanon began with a genuine therapeutic insight and ended with attempted murder. The mechanism of that transformation was not corruption in a simple sense. It was the systematic application of a tool, radical ego disruption, without the safeguards that legitimate therapy provides. When a mechanism that creates psychological vulnerability is deployed without ethical constraints, in an environment of total control, with a charismatic leader who is himself unmonitored and unaccountable, the outcome is not therapy. The outcome is a population stripped of the capacity for critical self-protection, available for whatever the unmonitored center decides next. This was episode 12 of the Mind Control Archives.